Hello there, folks, and welcome to the stream. My name is Mike D'Angelo, aka That Tellest Guy. I am joined with my lovely co-host, Rihanna.
Hello.
And our secondary co-host, Luna! Speak! Speak! We'll do a fluff. We'll do a fluff for you. Alright, so today we decided to do something a little different and a little bit weird. So we are going to be talking Tellest. So Rihanna and I decided it would be kind of fun to figure out future episodes, because we usually just kind of go, what are we going to talk about tonight? Same thing we talk about every night, Brian. Trying to take over the world.
Of Tellest.
So we are going to get into like a couple of the thoughts that we had. Rihanna has time to kind of think on the fly, but I have a couple of topics that I decided to put out there. So bread, cuisine, the cuisine of Tellest. What are your thoughts on that as a possible subject?
I suggested it earlier today.
The
cheeses of Tellest.
The cheeses. Who's that? Mahatma Buddha?
The charcuteries of Tellest.
So
it would be part of a travel guide, but like focusing mainly on the
focusing mainly on.
Leave me alone. So you can, like, George R.R. Martin had all the this stuff about food in his books,
I've long held that, like, when we're going to eventually do our our book of taverns for tabletop, one of the things that we need is each one of the taverns has to have like a staple food,
and we can make it a cookbook.
Yes,
I like to cook.
Yes, you do, and having you experiment with food would be a fun thing.
And we should probably like draw a distinction between food that can be replicated in the real world and things that incorporate Tellest creatures.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, in the very first book, like, we made the drink that was, like, red harpy blood banana drakeel. And then, like, later on in the series, Kelvin's like, oh, can you give me one of those? And he's like, if you don't have harpy blood, you can just do this instead.
Right.
So, something like that would be fun.
Kool-Aid.
Kool-Aid. That's what he said to the bartender. So the next one is obviously history and spectacular events. This one could be separate from Cataclysms of Tellest, which is like the events that literally shaped the world,
right.
Like actually like made things change.
Yeah, like what they would teach in history books in a Tellest school, so to speak.
Yep. So anything that's really this, and again, not necessarily things that did in this case shape the world, but that would be a separate one. So things like the fall could, because it was literally very important. Things like the war with the fallen angel and Ramos Youngblood. So they might not be integral to any of the stories that we've told so far.
But they're major historical events that contributed to.
Yep. So I think ahead of some of these, you and I have to do our research, and we have to figure out, like, there's like 77 kingdoms in Tellest, maybe even a little bit more. So we have to figure out, like, what are the big pieces of all of those things. And I know, like, I have an encyclopedia with a lot of this information, but we probably have a decent amount that information is not, strictly speaking, out there.
Add to your list, because when we were saying the history of Tellest, it made me think, like, the wizard studies of Tellest, like what you would learn in a school of magic, like what that curriculum would look like. That would be a fun one.
Okie badoingle.
Tellest has its own...
Tellest? There's an X in there that wasn't there before.
I can't talk today. The more you point it out, the more I'm... Listen. He's a silly one. I gotta keep it clean.
The weather of Tellest.
The weather of Tellest.
Tellest
meteorology.
Yep. Obviously, weather plays a big part of the Tellest universe because the magic kind of travels on the weather. And we've seen strange phenomenon and stuff like that, and that's not even including things that Edmund here would be able to do. Right. Side note, if you take a deeper look at Edmund, and you maybe do that, it's just your mom.
What?
It's just your mom.
What are you talking about?
It looks like your mom.
It does not at
100%.
My mother is not a long-faced man.
All right, so it was when she was younger.
Oh my god, I don't see it at all.
I do, 100%. We're gonna.
I think you're a crazy
person. We're gonna bring up a picture for everyone to look at.
Please don't.
Please don't. Anything else that you have to say about the weather?
That doesn't look like my mom.
It totally
Okay,
does.
We're good.
Matt, you're watching, right? Does that look like her mom?
Not at all.
I don't even know if he's watching. Probably not. All right, let's go to the Gods of Tellest. I can't believe that we actually haven't done this one yet, but we have a lot of religion in Tellest. The main ones, obviously, are the ones that we've named and everything like that, but it expands beyond that as well because we have like all the other races besides like the 3 or 4 main ones
Right.
who have, you know, Matthias, Narat, things like that. We have some pictures for sigils for some of them, but we would have to do a little bit of research to...
Right, as well as like what the holy factions do, like what they believe and why their
Yep.
views kind of differ from other parts of Tellest.
Yep. We know that like there's a good chance that like Narat and the Rhinotaur god Sirox are the same people. Like it's just all
Well, it's
interpretation.
Like, yeah, it's like the real world. It's,
Right.
You're saying the same thing.
Saying the
really,
same
but
thing, just using a different language.
Different customs and imagery.
We've got a lot of these are AI pictures that I just flung together really quick, but festivals of Tellest.
Yeah, I love
festivals
it.
and celebrations.
It looks
and
like the folk fest.
Yep. So I was thinking, we've got like the Cirque du Malorum.
Right.
We've got things like the Ancestor Festival in Bixby's
Yeah.
second story.
I like the idea of the Cirque du Malorum being more of a
Like a traveling...
traveling festival. Like, oh, it's the
Yeah.
time of year where they come around. We're gonna.
And we've talked before about like the Cirque du Malorum maybe having like splinter groups and stuff like that. Like it may have started off one way and then changed over time.
Right.
Because the Cirque du Malorum, being that it travels, we kind of wanted the idea that it traveled a little bit differently than maybe like the circus does in like the United States. Like
Right.
magic is a pervasive part of why it moves around.
Exactly, and I think in the Whispers of the Weirdwood, we're gonna explore sort of magic travel and like portal magic a little bit more than we've done in the past.
Yep.
So that'll be an interesting thing, because I would imagine you need to have a lot of magic involved to like put up and tear down the big old tents and whatnot.
Oh yeah. I mean, and we've seen shrinking magic at work too. So like, how fun would it be to just shrink down the big tent instead of having to put it away and everything like that? It's just, all right, here it goes in my little vial.
I didn't know Zelda was behind me, and she put her paw on my butt, and it scared me.
I'm glad you didn't go.
I thought I knew what it was, but I was like, wait, what? I had to reach behind me.
All right, this one's a Tellest original. This is a picture of the Arcanix Compendium. So this is books and tomes of Tellest.
Ooh, I like that.
And like libraries and stuff like that, because we kind of...
Talking about the books within books.
Yeah, we don't really talk about like... This is obviously a functional book. It's a spell book of some sorts, but we never talk about like, what are the people of Tellest reading? Like, who's the famous
new?
bards and scribes that are making books and stuff like that?
What's the Harry Potter of
Of
Tellest?
Tellest, yeah. Like, what is it that they're chatting about? That they're like, all right, let's start our book club.
I like it. I kind of like the idea of, I mean, so books in like the 1600s onward were like accessible, but it was still like a rarity, and they were like expensive and whatnot. But like in the 18th century, they had letters that were a big deal. So it was kind of like magazines that they would publish, and it would be chapters of a story, like ongoing.
Do you think
I think
that
that
like
would be kind of fantasy?
the whole shtick of like medieval times and everything was that not a lot of people could read.
Right.
In a world that's beset by magic, do you think they have kind of audiobooks? Like they open the book, even if they can't read, if they're well enough off to get the book, does it read to them when it's open? Like they turn the page and like the words are coming out.
So I feel like it would probably be a situation where we have a spell like that allows an audiobook essentially. But I think that in a world with magic, with magic, I would imagine like they're for the most part literate, but like the people who like excel would be the people who know different languages, including like magical languages, and the ability to like decipher text. So like, yeah, you can read, but can you read the Minotaur's language? Can you
Right.
read the,
Right.
or I'm sorry, the Rhinotaur's language? Can you read in
Why
like,
did you
the-
have to correct yourself? Like, no,
Well, it's
I can definitely,
Minotaur. Well,
I can
'cause
definitely
Minotaurs
read.
are Greek, not Telestian.
I like the idea of, like, I think what he's trying to say is that gnolls are jerks.
I think that would be like I think that there's a lot of value in like the language as opposed to the like just the written word. Because I would imagine like English is kind of pervasive, like it is.
Yeah.
Here.
Well, I mean, we've talked before about, like, the great library of Tellest, or of Atalatha. Like, we know that there's a big building. It's not all scholarly. Like,
Right.
I'm sure there's some reason that people are going in there to learn. But I think thus far, every book that we have put out is about some kind of scholarly pursuit. Like, in Silver Serpent, when they go to do, like, the research on, like, what might be causing whatever creature to do whatever, it's a scholarly pursuit. Like, no one's ever like, hey, what you reading? Like, there is none of that yet.
True.
Which is kind of weird coming from someone who's writing a book.
It is interesting. Even in my little story, Cassandra was writing her findings. They were wrong, but she was doing it anyway.
Still a scholarly pursuit.
It's a scholarly pursuit. Yeah.
It's an interesting notion.
I like that.
So side by side with the books is entertainment of Tellest. So what are they doing to keep themselves happy and occupied and everything like that? They've had Coliseum stuff forever and ever and ever, and it's just like it is in our history. They also just introduced this new sport in the timeline that we're exploring now, which is Tower Sphere, which is kind of like, you know, gladiatorial combat meets American football in a way, plus croquet, a little bit of croquet. So they are doing something like that. What kind of ideas would you have to throw out there? What kind of stuff are they doing? Are they doing
Definitely plays, I would imagine, like some sort of like theater troupe kind of a situation. You could explore child's games, like games that you would see kids play. Child's games. Children's is a child.
Children's?
A child.
I feel like that was not intentional. Confirm or
child's
deny.
game. I plead the fifth. So listen, but like you know how they have like the maypole kind of a situation, or you have like
Jacks.
Pogs.
Pogs.
Tellest pogs. But like even
I'm playing with the bones of my ancestors.
yes, that was actually kind of what I was thinking, because like we have the ring around the rosy pocket full of posies rhyme that has like some really disturbing origins, and I feel like a lot of children in like the streets of fantasy would have some of that like very dark,
so
you know, sing-songiness.
that's kind of like in line with the concept of the Ancestor Festival that we were talking about earlier. Like, it's a celebration of life and death in a way.
Right.
So they're not, like, strictly speaking, afraid of, like, skeletons or anything like that. But, and this will kind of go hand in hand with one of the things that we'll talk about in a little bit. The concept of death in a fantasy world where certain things may or may not be looked at the same way. Permanent, yeah. It may not be looked at the same way that we look at them. Like, is it offensive to play with a skeleton when you are definitively sure, like, all right, like, the soul is gone out of this thing, like, they don't care about any of that kind of stuff.
Right.
Is that really a problem?
As taboo as it would be. I mean, yeah, because you would imagine, like, so with magic, you have the opportunity for some serious trauma, you know, like it's one thing to say like, oh, I saw, you know, my mom die, but it's another thing entirely to say she you know, thorns sprouted from her eyeballs and her, you know, her body contorted into like inhuman shapes as she was like flung into pieces. Like, you don't know. Like,
there's a whole mess of ways.
there's a whole
that
mess of
things
things.
could go.
Yeah, it could be horrible. Or like, you know, oh, I spent the last 1,000 years as a grasshopper. You just don't know.
Yeah, well, we'll have to talk about that during the later component as well.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, microphone. I didn't mean to beat you. We've got the age of invention is another topic that we can talk about because. And I skipped a couple of things.
The Industrial Revolution.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously know that magic is like the pervading Prevailing? Both.
Prevailing?
It's the source of kind of influence in a lot of ways that invention doesn't need to be, because when you have magic, do you require other things to make life easier, you know?
Yeah, but I mean, there's also the situation where you have like somebody who can negate magic, or your magic is not working, and in that instance, technology is your
Right. Well, and not only that, but what if you don't have magic in a world of magic? You have to,
yep,
you know,
have to rely
balance
on
the
other
field
things.
some other way, especially if you're in a world where the people around you are considered dangerous because of their magic. Like, are you just going to be like, yep, I guess I have nothing? Like, yes, you could probably train in some kind of martial arts or something like that, but you wouldn't necessarily, you know, be able to plan out something like that.
You cast Fireball, I cast Colt 45.
Well, and that's the whole thing. In book 3 of the Legacy series, we know that like the gunpowder age was on its way. Like there weren't guns yet, there weren't cannons or anything like that. We were still with ballistas and catapults and things like that, but we are moving more and more into that realm. So that could certainly be something that we explore a little bit more. And one piece that we didn't talk about yet is how does magic and invention go hand in hand? You know, like we have talked about.
Well, there's Virgil.
There's Virgil,
Right.
who's basically the Tellest equivalent of like a Warforged.
Mm-hmm.
But like, if you were going to invent something, like in a way, Maximus is bestowed some kind of magic ability to create the things that he creates.
Right.
He's given visions that help him to make sense of like the schematics. He knows that there's magical components. Like even in the very first book, where he's making the Quinicus, he knows that he has to study the dead horse first.
Right.
And to make sure that the horse doesn't rot, he's going and getting the Everice. Not Everus, which is the hell of the Tellest universe, but Ever Ice. Ice that will, you know, basically dry ice.
Right.
A magical equivalent to dry ice. But it is magic that's making that happen. So, just notions like that.
I do like that in Tellest there's like restrictions, and it's not, and then this happened because magic, and then this happened because magic. Like you actually have like
Yeah. Now, and that's not to say that we can't write our way into a situation where magic is responsible for things.
but it makes sense
Yeah.
in the context
Right.
of, and you know,
Yeah.
like in
And
this
the-
in this
and yeah.
case with Mortimer.
Mort.
Mort.
So we also have Scandals of Tellest. We're going back to your mom for this one.
It's not my mom. My God.
So, you know, like what kind of thing are people gossiping? What kind of thing is people? What kind of thing are people gossip about?
Right. Well, I mean, I would say like the one thing that we talked about being kind of taboo is the different races intermingling. So, like,
Yeah.
if a Logano and a Rhinotaur were to fall in love, that would be hot goss.
Yeah. Well, and even in the April's Fools, we talked about the Knoll and the Elf, you know,
Right.
tryst and what that produced. Like, does Kyra have any chance of a normal life with either of those two races?
Right.
We know that in this case, really both of the parents aren't with anybody of their race anyway. They're kind of loners on their own, but like, would she have any chance? And maybe that's something that we explore in the April's Fools 2 or 3 or something like that, because
I like that.
we do know that there is a great evil sweeping through the land, and the whole reason that they're doing it is because they don't like magic users. Well, guess what? The elves are nothing but magic users.
Yep.
You know, does she go there and implore, like, hey, all the heroes are gone, they're going to eventually turn their sights on you, like, it behooves you to help us.
Right.
Like, is that, like, the beginnings of a great battle that's starting to form?
It could be. It could also be like an ideological battle, because I assume that Tellest also would have politics as one of their main kind of focuses, like what town relations are happening with another.
Yeah.
Trading would be a big thing. Like events like the Cirque du Mororum would be something they're talking about.
We know in Transformed, the idea of magic being used in Sun Garden was a whole thing.
That was a whole thing.
The werebears being werebears was a whole thing because it
Yeah.
was transformative magic as far as the town was concerned. Just
Right.
all kinds of stuff like that.
I feel like there's probably like a desire for people to have something to talk about, like for people who are so used to the status quo. So I feel like any kind of disruption to like the norms of society would be talked about in a way that's like, did you hear? Oh, that's horrible. Oh, we have to go see what that's all about because that's horrible.
Where is
And
that
I'm
so I can avoid it?
Yeah, exactly. I need to know exactly where it's going to happen and when so I can make sure that we don't all go and watch and talk about it later.
Well, speaking of going places and where and everything like that, tourist spots of Tellus.
Spots, that's a good one.
We do like the tour guide Talking Tellus, so we've talked about Percynthia and we've talked about Adelatha a little bit, but maybe like we could go into like deeper dives into a place like Raster Springs where we know it's like a magical place, but it might have hot springs that people go to. So like when Adelia and her great-grandmother show up there could just be people like, hello! Oh, well, this is not quite the magic place that I was expecting it to be. You know, everybody has shown up here.
I like it. There's a website called Atlas Obscura where it's like not the main tourist attractions of a town, but it's like the little places that like locals like to go to. And I think that
we're
would
talking
be
in
fun.
reality.
In reality, yeah, but I think that would be a fun concept to explore. Like maybe in certain towns, there's obviously there's the temples or like the gathering spots for like the people, but maybe there's also like a well where there's a legend that someone died in there and like you can still hear their screams echoing because they never stopped falling or something.
It's good stuff, and we could use the fantasy writing prompts book to develop a lot of these things if we didn't have. We talked about this briefly before, but the cataclysms of Tellus, like the things that literally shaped the world. So the fall had literal floating islands fall out of the sky for thousands of years. They had battles with titans, which in Heart of the Forest literally made lakes and reservoirs and things like that. Like what other things? What volcanic reactions? What earthquakes? What things?
Inventions? Because honestly, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Like the fall of gods or those kind of things would be a big deal.
Did mountains form? Did lakes form? Did lakes dry up?
Right.
Like big things that really changed the way that like Icarus no longer sees the world that he once knew.
Yep.
We've got Life in Tellest, which is, let me see if I have a good picture for that. And we'll go back to the cuisine one. So that is normal life in Tellest. What do bathrooms look like? What do their lights look like? What does their furniture look like? Is it normal upholstered furniture? Is it someone shapes a mushroom to be a little bit more cottagecore?
Is furniture enchanted in a wizard's house?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
and you can take that from a perspective of like, hey, from town to town, it's different.
I also like the idea of looking at it from the perspective of the profession. Like, do you have, a blacksmith going to create things all day and coming home and be like, oh, that was such a hard 9 to 5. Like,
right.
Like, what do they do afterward?
And then he goes to flush his toilet and it doesn't flush, and he's like, I gotta call the plumber.
And then what do you do at that point? You don't have a cell phone. Do you just go out and go, plumber?
Plumber! And we have specifically come out and said we are doing right by our characters, and we are giving them modern-esque plumbing.
Well, like
in the big cities and
of
stuff
like
that.
the Roman kind of tradition. Like they should have.
You're not going to see sinks or anything in Westwick, but in Adelatha, in the more upper to middle class, you'd see sinks and toilets and stuff like that.
Don't quote me on this because I don't remember if I'm recalling this actually or if it was like part of a weird fan fiction in Harry Potter, but I think at some point J.K. Rowling said like wizards don't really need bathrooms. They can just zap the poop away.
Now, and here's a question. I don't remember if she clarified this at all. When she's saying zap the poop out, does that mean while it's in the intestines, or is that like you have to poop it first?
And then you just, like, obliterate it? Like, what do you do? I don't know.
Fi cosa bigonis.
Do you take it out of your own, like, what do you do?
Right, like...
What happens if it's diarrhea? Can you...
Luna, are you okay?
You okay, baby?
Luna,
Luna?
you okay?
You okay? Yeah, she's lonely.
I thought I heard a burp or something, and I was worried it was a
She
poop.
might have. She burped earlier.
I was worried it was a poop.
She big time burped.
Did you big time burp?
Big time burp.
Don't worry, we only got a couple more topics to talk about.
Yeah.
Ow!
Well, we did also say, this isn't really a Talking Tellest, but we talked about using a Talking Tellest
To talk about her.
to star Luna, since she's our most famous family member.
Check the 7 million yet?
Not yet, but Luna.
Gotta be close.
Actually, let me see.
Actually.
I don't know.
And while we're talking about that, we'll talk about the non-affiliated people in Tellest.
6.8.
6.8. So almost all of our stories are mainly about like some of the bigger groups. So like you've got like guilds and lots of cities and towns and everything like that.
Right.
But it's very rare that we have like, all right, here's a bandit or something, like a bandit group or something like that. The Declan story, The Whispers, is a lot like that, and obviously we have the Cirque du Malorum, which is its own thing.
Mm-hmm.
But like, what does it look like to be a bandit in the world of Tellus? Do you have a hideout in the woods? Do you,
Right.
you know, is
there a club with like a secret entrance or a secret password?
right? What is
in order to get in?
What does a secret look like in a world of magic? Can people
Or-
figure out? No, 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 no! You are not allowed to speak anymore.
I only said.
I don't care. Shut up.
But wait, no, because you could have situations where you have a Tellest book club, and that could be its own thing. You could have like a what do you call it? You know, like we have the Red Hat Society or something for old ladies.
Yes.
You could have something like that, like the widows of Tellest with a spider as their
So,
the Black Widows.
I like that. So we're gonna come to some of these things with homework.
Yeah.
And be and tell each other like what
I like that.
what the things are, what the
Yeah.
affiliations
Oh,
are.
that'll be fun. I like that a lot.
This will be one you like a lot too. Pets of Tellust.
Definitely.
What kind of pets are home to which kingdoms? And is your pet in your kingdom my food?
Right. Or my predator.
Mhm.
Like you don't know what the situation is.
Yeah. And is it like is the situation in it where it's your predator? Are they not my predator because they've been selectively bred to be smaller and cuter and stuff like
Right.
that? Like,
Or is there a situation where like maybe there's a threshold for, because you have like the anthropomorphic races, obviously like a cat or a Kaja, a cat person, probably wouldn't own a cat.
right? It's all a
Because
little
there's
bit
like an
an
intelligence
an
kind of,
indentured servitude kind of feeling
right,
to
like
it.
like certain animals.
But would they have a dog because it's a little bit more like
Exactly.
you're
Well, they're
inferior
yeah,
to me?
they're inferior.
Yeah.
Or like, would a Logano have a pet lizard? Like, I feel like it's probably.
I feel like the Logano would because they do worship a salamander god in a lot of
Okay,
cases.
maybe.
So
but,
is it like,
But is
hey,
it a pet at that point, or is
you-
it like a familiar?
kind of, yeah, right? Because it's like, hey, like, yes, you serve me, but in the same way that I serve the god.
Right.
So that kind of thing.
Right. That might be something to consider. We can also consider
Because
like.
at the same time, like, monkeys are basically to humans, and
Right.
people have monkeys as pets
Right.
and stuff like
But
that.
I feel like historically, like a centaur would be like offended by seeing a horse used as like a beast of
Oh
burden.
yeah. If a
There's,
bridle
like-
or a saddle was on something
Right.
like that, yeah, you could see that. But then you could very well have a centaur who's like,
And you yelled at me for just.
well, there is a word that you can't say.
I didn't
You
say it.
can't
I
say it. You
wasn't
got. Yeah, you
gonna.
didn't say it because I said.
No, I wasn't gonna. I just wanted you to remember what
I
was gonna
remembered
say.
without it being needed to be said. So we've talked about herbalism before in the Tellus universe, but we've never actually talked about alchemy on a Talking Tellus. We've talked about in the book Mageborn, the whole reason that Adelia goes to Folly's Glen is to get ingredients for alchemy, which she screwed up before and she needs to
Right.
replenish. But even then, we're talking about magical alchemy, and we don't have to necessarily do that. We could be talking about tinctures that healers are doing. We could talk about concoctions that might help
Weapons.
professions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like, would a blacksmith be like, hey, I need, like, this kind of moss that grows here because I can use it to make, like, a very special kind of whetstone. It might
Right.
not be a magical ingredient, but as far as the world of Tellus goes,
Or I
it has
can-
its properties.
Yeah, or I can add it to the metal that I'm forging to strengthen it, or whatever the case may be.
Yep.
We need a periodic table of Tellistments.
Whew, that would be tremendous, I think, because
Oh, we
the
can-
concept is that there's so many more, right? Like
Right.
if you were conceptualizing it, it's so much more than the world that we live in because magic is so pervasive.
Right. I think we wouldn't have to define like each specific chemical, but like maybe define like what you might find on the shelf of an alchemist, like what type of different things. Because like they should have like a bubble solution, like something like lighthearted, but then also poisons, but then also like a cleaning agent. You know.
I think it's a good
And
idea.
then I think that there's a possibility of having like an enchanted serum. Like basically, like what if you could condense magic into like a concentrated force? Basically, what could that do? What
Right.
could it do in the wrong hands?
Yeah, and we're talking about substances and things like that, like a sticky substance. Like we've actually seen that in play in Stealing Saramore. They basically like made like this sticky substance that was kind of like sticky foam, which is like insulation in our world. But
Right.
they used it to like stick a bad guy to a tree and be like, all right, we don't have to deal with you anymore. Bye bye.
You sap.
um,
We never also talked about.
we never also.
We never also, and then simultaneously, maybe perhaps also could have. Do you ever wonder what it would be like to? You know that meme.
Yeah. Do you ever wonder what it would be like if you took no days off?
That's another one. Drugs. We never talked about drugs of Tellest, really. I don't think there's any instance where like there was some kind
Are
of.
you talking about like a headache drug, or are you talking about like,
Like a
pipe
psychedelic.
weed and stuff like
Yeah,
that?
like
that?
stuff that would be mind altering, because I don't think that. I mean, you have like dream walkers and stuff like
Yeah.
that, but is there a way to induce a vision?
Who do they go to for their vision quest?
Right, like is that and is that a thing? Like, do you have like
Mushrooms
the
and
equivalent of like an opium den, and in freaking Wispus's world where like everything is shrunk down, would like one mushroom mess up the whole town if
Right.
it were cooked wrong? or
Would
something?
would shrinking or enlarging a substance increase or decrease the potency?
Right.
Here's another one. What is the ayahuasca of the Tellus world? So we talked about this earlier. The interpretation of undead or life after death, rebirth of some sort in the Tellus universe.
Right.
And again, the world contains multitudes.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that like the way that this kingdom treats things is the same way across the board.
Right.
But what is it like if one kingdom is like, oh yeah, we bring Dad back as soon as he's gone, and we force his skeleton to do menial tasks around the house.
Yeah, that's an implication. But and so Tellest, if I'm not mistaken, and I don't know if this still holds true, but so the gods of Tellest are tangible entities. They're
Correct.
not concepts.
Well, they're both, because you have to be one if you're the other, I would think,
Okay.
right?
But
Like if you are a thought, if you are a real person, your legend grows,
Okay.
right? So they are real people. Like the characters are seen in some cases.
And then the Tellest version of Hell, Everest,
Mhm.
that's a tangible place, right?
Well, I mean, we've
Like
seen
it exists.
We've seen in the Nexus that Sebrum, I think is the guy. It might not be Sebrum. The god of basically death is basically saying, all right, you're going here, you're going here. So
Right.
he's choosing which way the souls are going. So,
So
you would assume that yes, there is an Elysian Fields and there is a Hades.
So it's a tangible binary. So do all the
Well, and that's not true either, because just because there are those two, we also mentioned a couple of times in the universe that
ghosts they
well,
don't do it.
Well, we've mentioned before that it's the deepest hell. So there are varying levels of,
Right.
where the afterlife will lead you.
Okay. So that, I mean, I think that the concept of like the soul basically is confirmed in this world.
Oh yeah,
right?
for sure.
Yeah,
I mean, just look
so
at Bixby.
there's-
Bixby,
right.
he reconstitutes his soul once it's in the Nexus,
Right.
and can choose which doorway out of the Nexus to come through.
Right. So if that is the case, it doesn't necessarily negate the idea of like the different belief systems, because certain people might think, well, this isn't where you go after you die if we don't do this to your body, like
Right.
if we don't bury it, if we don't burn it, if we don't,
Right,
know,
yeah, there's all kinds of
put it to
rites
work
and rituals and
afterward,
stuff
yeah.
like that. Furthermore, like, we're looking at a picture right now of undead being raised by a necromancer, which might have some darker connotations.
Right.
Certainly it's because these people who are all gray and black and everything, they look like they've been dead for a while.
Right.
But what does it look like when someone dies and a cleric brings them back to life through holy magic?
Right.
Why is that looked at more fondly, perhaps?
Yeah.
Would it be considered a miracle, or would it be considered would a
abomination.
necromancer would a necromancer say, like, they were dead, like, and you stole that death from them?
Yeah, and does a necromancer return the soul to the original body? And if that's the case, can it return the soul to another living body
Right.
of someone else, like do a tradesies?
Right, and is the concept of that necromancer the same as every necromancer's,
Right.
culture and beliefs and
because in
their
one
morals?
in one you're calling him a necromancer, in another it's a miracle, like to raise the dead, and then maybe in another one it's we could explore that with the concept of the soul weaver.
Yep, and we did
Because
introduce.
do have the soul weavers, so maybe like there's a precedence for like an exchange being made or something.
Well, and with that in mind, obviously you can't talk about the life after death notion without talking about reincarnation as well.
Right.
You take necromancy and the divination kind of side of things, and you introduce a third, because if you're someone who believes in reincarnation, neither of those two options is
Are
at balance with how things are supposed to go, because that soul or the energy therein
Right.
was supposed to transfer to something or some things else.
So that falls in line, I think, with like Lucinda's view of transfiguration, because the idea is like you don't it's a law of physics. Energy is not created; it just takes another form.
Right. Yeah.
So
The amount of energy never really changes.
right.
But does it?
Does it in
our
Tellest?
world, yeah. But yeah,
Can you create something from absolute nothing, and can you take something and turn it to absolute nothing?
Yep. So I'm going to skip one real quick because it kind of goes hand in hand with what we're talking about. Let's just vibe in place for a second.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh,
Do some
am I
elevator.
supposed to talk?
Do some elevator music for me or something.
I don't know what kind of elevator this is, but I want to be there. I'm really not a skilled co-host.
Where is? Keep on talking.
Well,
I need to bring up concept art.
all right, cool. So while he's bringing up concept art, I'm gonna fill the silence.
You're done.
with talking about being
So-
done.
So we'll talk about the multiverse of Tellest now as well, because we haven't really had an opportunity to talk about that either. We're talking about energy and where it can go and everything like that. And right now we talk about it in such a finite way because this is the only world we know. Like, there
Right.
is no pocket dimension or anything like that. So how are you going to get energy from somewhere else? And that's kind of the notion of magic in the Tellest universe.
Right.
Magic is not pulled necessarily from the world of Tellest. It was shared with another space.
Right.
It was like another plane. and it goes hand in hand with our world, and really a lot of what Tellest is the doorways into other worlds.
Right, and you have people who can see through those veils.
Right, and in fact, we have the short story novella Searchlight, which goes into that perspective a lot, because they introduce warp elves, who are elves who were around since the beginning of time, and they had the magic to go to these other worlds, but because magic on Tellest ceased to exist for so long, the doorway back from that world wasn't available to them, so the world they went to was destitute, like there was nothing in it. It was decayed, it was ugly, and you're immortal, basically. So if you're able to find some way to eat, some way to do everything, but you're not able to make a civilized society,
right,
what do you turn into? But the warp elves is just one concept that we kind of explored to that notion. We do know that there's other worlds that people have gone to. We know that there was other people who were not on the planet when the fall happened.
Right.
We plan on exploring those kind of concepts. We know that the Kin Malar showed up from another world.
Right.
There's talk that we've had about the other races having arrived from other worlds as well, because we know that the prime three races, you're rubbing off on me, the prime three races were always there, but like, where did the Gnolls come from? Where did the Logano come from? Where did the Minotaurs? They all showed up after the fall, so something disrupted the veil and allowed for that kind of travel to happen.
Question: does Tellest have a solar? Like, is it the Earth solar system, or is it different? Like,
it is, because Tellest is Earth.
Okay, so relatively similar concept, but maybe it's like an alien planet kind of thing as well, or is it more like?
Well, so like when humanity got banished to Earth. It was, the magic wasn't there, so it was like a dark and gloomy place until they Minecraft that place to their liking, and it became the civilization that we have read about, and then ultimately what it became now. So like, technically Tellest has happened and will happen. Like that's the way that it
wibbly wobbly tiny wimey.
Wimey, yeah. Well, I mean, it's not necessarily a loop or like a Mobius strip or anything like that. It's if you are taking it from like the river perspective, it was Tellest. It still was Tellest even when Earth broke off, and then it fuses the both together again, and it becomes one Tellest again.
I like it. Are we gonna go as crazy as like Everything Everywhere All at Once and have a version of elves with hot dog ears, or?
I mean, I would assume that based on the fact that almost all of our craziest stories come from like an April Fool's kind of concept, there's no way that we don't have something just completely off the wall someday.
I like it.
We just go weirder and weirder with this universe, and I feel like that's...
Well, as it gets bigger, it's more fun to play with some of the stuff, and you and I are both like very...
whimsical.
We're whimsical and we're campy. Like, we like campy stuff. I think me more than you, as far as like the shows and stuff that I'll watch. But I like things to be corny. They're cute. It's fun.
It is fun. I'm going to keep this picture up because it's in line with the next topic that we can talk about. Wild magic. And not necessarily the book that I wrote, but wild magic, the concept. So, like, what happens when magic goes wrong? Like, either by a spell that a caster misfires, or by the world permutating it and like something changing. Yeah, like, does, like, what do those explorations look like?
Oh, I like that concept. It's like, if you have let's say, somebody enchants a flower to, like, never wilt or something, and then that somehow gets carried on the wind into
pollinates.
A forest or whatever, does the forest never die because it, like...
Right.
That gets out into, like, the wilds.
Yep, yeah, there's all kinds of things. And again, we've talked about the weather of Tellest, and it really can kind of cross-pollinate in a lot of ways. Like,
And be a conduit, like maybe lightning strikes, something that's magical.
Is that part of the cataclysm that we were talking about before that literally reshaped things? Like, were there situations where there was a complete desert and something like your magic that you were just talking about cast through the desert and all of a sudden trees were able to thrive that weren't there before, and it cuts a path through the desert, and now there's 2 deserts.
And what effect does that have on the ecosystems that exist there? Ooh,
yeah,
I like that.
And is the magic that exists there, does it allow for the ecosystems and the animals that had to move along? Did they rapidly evolve to deal with that?
Right.
You know, do you have some kind of critter that changed so drastically in so short a time?
Well, we have the Squirtle that was a mighty predator of the skies, and over time became more of a household parrot kind
a
of
pet.
creature.
One of the pets of Tellest. One of the topics is beyond death, what happens after death if one is not resurrected or raised, so we kind of talked about that a little bit. So the afterlife, reincarnation, things like that. And then the last one was the Wizard Studies of Tellest. What would you learn in a school of magic?
Right. I think that would be fun. Like, what is the magical curriculum? Also, I've mentioned this many times, and I don't think we ever did it. Fashion of Tellest.
Ah, yes.
We have parameters, I feel like, that we use for, like, the fantasy garb. Like, what we consider to be fantasy. Like, I don't think, like, we've had situations where an artist has given us something where, it looks like a t-shirt or a polo or something, and we're like, no, that's too modern.
It's a little too modern. And we don't ever go that modern, despite the fact that, obviously, Tellest came from Earth in this iteration.
Right. But blue jeans aren't going to be a thing that you find. It's going to be, like natural fibers.
Right. You've got the medieval Renaissance kind of appearance. You've got Greek kind of stuff.
Right.
And you've got steampunk. And that's pretty much like the mesh, right?
Oh, then you also have, like, the island cultures. We've been having fun with that.
That's very true. You have, certainly things are going to be dependent on the kind of locales and things like that. If you are going to go to a cold weather climate, you're going to have the barbarian skins and hides and stuff like that, and furs.
And I like the concept of exploring kind of, like, the characters that we use, the color palettes that they're associated with. Like Adelia and her little flower became kind of like an identifier for her over time, and it was more like a happenstance thing where we're like, here's this artist rendition, and then another artist picked up on that. Off of it. Yeah, Bixby and his yellow and red is always a thing,
which is very Wolverine and Deadpool now.
It is very Wolverine and Deadpool, but I wonder if, like, so obviously in the world of Tellest, you're going to have basically celebrities, right? Maybe it makes sense for someone who's trying to aspire to be, like, a famous figure to always wear kind of, like, an iconic
Right, hey, I'm going to look at a costume that they wore before.
Right.
I'm going to dress like David Garris because he's the champion of the Coliseum.
Lucinda in her purple attire. Like, I think that's an interesting concept. Like, yeah.
I like it.
That's all.
So I think that's our 20 that we came up with today. It might even be 21 or 22. 21. That's awesome. Obviously there is some intermingling of ideas and everything like that, but
I still want to do a
what if?
Well, we're definitely doing the what if. That'll be part of the series, but I want to do a sort of a live game of something.
You want to do almost like a tabletop experience where we're not choosing the story ourselves, the story is choosing itself.
Well, not just that, but like a blind date thing. You know what I mean? Like something fun. Like let's what would happen if this character were put into this situation?
Right.
Go. Just for fun. I think it'll help with like just character development and thinking about what makes somebody tick.
Is your back hurting?
My back always hurts. I got the Skolo.
Got the Skolo. Got the backbreakers. All right, let's wrap things up. Let's go to our show closing page. Folks, on the screen right now, you should see a lot of the places that you can find Tellest out there on the internet. Tellest.com is a great first place to start. It'll lead you off into other directions that will bring you to our other projects. We've got a couple of places that you can get some premium goodies from us. Patreon.com/Tellest is a place where you can go for like subscriber-based content. We have tabletop stuff on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and we have art stuff on Tuesdays and Thursdays. If you don't want to do subscription, we have physical goodies that you can get at tellest.etsy.com, and that includes things like battle maps and stickers, bookmarks, Rihanna's one-of-a-kind handcrafted magic wands. You can also go to battlemapfantasy.com because it is a forward that takes you to Drive Through RPG. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer, but it will eventually bring you there. That is where you can find digital versions of all our maps that you can buy one-off if you didn't want to do like the subscriber-based content that you can do over on Patreon. We've got 2 TikTok channels that you should check out. At Weird Witch Wands is where you can find more of Rihanna's handcrafted one-of-a-kind magic wands. I think, are you going to start showing off some of your other projects on there? Like the...
oh, I will. The Bosom Buddies.
Bosom Buddies and your pens and stuff.
Probably not the pens, because that's just like a little fun.
Yeah, but you could show off a couple of them, and
I could do this.
They're cute.
It is cute.
And then we also have at Tales of Tellest on TikTok. That is where you can find our puppies. Try and see if you can get Luna. Yeah, see, she's saying, "What about me?" You can get Luna over 7 million views on that one video. And the last 2 places that we'll bring your attention to, youtube.com/@worldofTellest is where all of our videos end up after twitch.tv moves them off the platform. But twitch.tv/thattellestguy is the only place to start off and talk with us live, earn your quest coins, queue up for a future game, all that good stuff. That's going to wrap us up for tonight. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time. And we'll miss you.